Hello, my name is Anna Parkin, and I was able to do my observation at Hillside Middle School in Miss Lotu's classroom. And she teaches 8th graders, so each of the classes I observed consisted only of 8th graders. She would typically have about 30 students in her classroom, so the classes were pretty crowded. Um, and each of her classes varied on the amount of ESL students, but typically there'd be about half, or just over half, or just under half. And so the different languages that they spoke in this class varied a ton because there were students from countries all over the world, from places like Guatemala, Thailand, Tanzania, Mexico, and several others. And the way that this classroom was set up was pretty typical. The whiteboard was at one end of the classroom, and then the desks were just set up in rows where everyone was facing the teacher for instruction. And so typically the teacher would stay up at the whiteboard during instruction, but she would typically walk around the rows during assignments to make sure that the students were on task and to offer any needed help. And so the teacher would usually begin the class with about 10 to 15 minutes of free reading time. So the students would just be able to kind of pick a couple books off the shelf that they would want to read. And usually the lower ELL students, the lower level, they would pick children's books such as like Dr. Seuss books were really popular. And the reason for this was because it was simple enough for them to identify a lot of the different words and to sound out the different sounds in those short words, but it also exposed them to a lot of new vocabulary, especially books like Dr. Seuss because of all the different vocabulary that's used. And even though a lot of the words are made up words, it still teaches them the different sounds that are made, so they're more familiar with phonetics. So after that, the teacher would usually just do some work on the whiteboard, and then the students would work on different assignments like worksheets, or they would usually get with a partner and work on memorizing a script in English, and then they would present that script orally to the teacher or to the entire classroom sometimes. So I feel like the assignments and the different activities expose the kids to reading, to writing, to speaking, and to hearing English. And so for my first concrete example, this happened during one of the class periods, and that they were working on memorizing a script. And so I was able to work with a girl from Thailand and a girl from Tanzania, and they were both first year English learners. And so their English was still pretty fresh, and they both still struggled, but the girl from Thailand was able to do pretty well. She could read, and she could speak, and she could understand a lot, but the girl from Tanzania really struggled. And as she read, she she would just be stuck on like every single word, and we'd really have to help her sound out each letter at a time, each sound at a time. She really struggled with phonetics and identifying the words on a page and what sound they make when you speak. And one of the sounds that she really struggled with was th, made by th. And her scripts required her to say the word thirsty. But every time that she'd come across that word, she would say dursty instead of thirsty. So she would replace the th with d. And so we went over that quite a few times, but she still struggled with it quite a bit. And I wasn't sure if it was her accent making it difficult, that she just maybe wasn't familiar with the th sound, or if she just wasn't really understanding the sound that th makes together. For my next example, it came when I was doing free reading with one of the students. So the teacher and the volunteers would typically walk around during free reading and read with each student for about 1 or 2 minutes, just making sure that they were on task and that they were getting the help that they needed, so they weren't stuck. And I was working with one girl, and I noticed that she really struggled with her S's, and she would add S's to words that didn't have S's, or she would leave out S's on words that did. So she would say things like people when it was really, or she would say, she would say peoples if it was people, and she would say schools if it was school, or she would say live instead of lives, or always instead of always. So I feel like this was something that could be worked on and could be an easy fix for her. And so we worked on that for a while, and we would underline the S's at the end of words that did have S's to make sure that she pronounced them, and we would write little X's at the end of words that she typically pronounced S's that didn't have S's at the end. And so as we did this, she got more comfortable with those words, and she improved a lot, and that brought her a lot of happiness, and it was cool to see. And so for my last example, it came from when the students are writing in their journal, and the teacher would typically give them a short prompt. So just tell me about your family, or what's your favorite hobby, and then the students would just write a few sentences explaining their answer in English. And we would walk around and give needed support. And so I have a couple examples that I'm going to share with you guys. So the first one was, my mom are not working right now, instead of my mom is not working right now. The second one is, they is so good with English, instead of they are so good at English. And the last one is, I are going to play soccer, instead of I am going to play soccer. So something that a lot of the students really struggled with was subject-verb agreement. And I think this is something that is a little bit more difficult to instruct, especially if they don't really understand English yet. And so I think this is something that really will come in time as they have more exposure to English, as they read more and as they speak more and as they're spoken to. I think that a lot of the things that maybe they said at first will start to sound unnatural to them, and they'll start to say the correct subject verbs. So I really enjoyed observing this classroom and seeing these ESL students progress, and I just think they're amazing. So thank you.